Good morning, everybody, on this glorious day. So, really does feel like we're in midsummer now after a pretty wet and chilly half of the year. And so today's topic, we are going to be looking at how can we give a bit more to our students and at the same time take care of our own needs and avoid running into burnout. And, this is something I think we've probably all been a bit guilty of because we're in a caring profession and there is an instinct, I think, when we see people's needs and we have an idea of what would be useful, how to help them. And so, we don't want to sit back and watch someone struggling. We want to kind of step in and try and help out. The problem with that is that we can end up over giving and then it becomes unsustainable and then we have to roll back or we just hit a patch of ill health or burnout. So we need to be really mindful of how we balance that. And I think initially it's useful to look at the reasons and the focus on what it is we want to give and why. And that can really help us determine the action to take next. So, as I said, initially it can just come from that very pure place of just wanting to help people because we see that they're struggling. It can also come from a place of feeling like we're not quite enough. And this is something to be really mindful of before you dive into all the extras that you might think about doing, is checking in with yourself. Is it coming from a place of, my classes aren't good enough, I'm not offering enough, I'm not doing enough, and therefore I have to give more to justify what I charge or to feel good about myself as a teacher. So checking in with that. And often people get so much more value out of your classes than perhaps you might realize. And not everybody shares that, and they could just be the quiet ones in the class whose lives are being quietly transformed and you don't really get to hear about it much. So check in with yourself. Is there an issue of feeling like somehow you're not quite enough? And do a reality check about whether that's actually true. Because the chances are that you're doing more than enough, that your classes are more than good enough. So check in with that, because that might be a space that you need to work on within yourself a little bit before we start looking at extra things to add in. Because if you don't address that feeling, that's never going to go away, and you're always going to have this feeling of not doing enough. So no matter what you do, there's always going to be the feeling like you should be doing more. So that's one thing to work alongside this. It may also come from a place of wanting to offer good value for money. So it might be the case that you're aware of people in your classes may be struggling a little bit. You're aware maybe generally of the economic situation and feeling like you have to offer really good value for money for people. Again, that's not a bad thing to think about, but you have to still keep in mind that to be sustainable, you have to price yourself correctly. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to meet your own needs and you're not going to be able to carry on teaching. And I would caution against a sort of race to the bottom in terms of pricing. People who are just looking for the cheapest yoga they can find, and maybe that's just where they're at. Probably a lot of those people wouldn't pay for yoga at all. They'd perhaps just find free stuff online, or they might have a cheap gym membership that includes some yoga classes. So, you know, if that works for them, that's fine. But you don't necessarily want to be trying to appeal to those people because they're not going to be able or willing to pay you what you need for you to sustain yourself. So again, being mindful about who it is that you're trying to reach. And you want to reach people who really value what you offer. And people who do will realize that it's amazing value for money. And I guess tied in with that as well is this idea of wanting to perhaps be competitive. You know, I know a lot of people worry about it being a very crowded marketplace and they want to stand out and they want to be a bit competitive. So again, I would look at your needs, and we've been doing this month a little bit about assessing what turnover you need to give yourself a reasonable salary, having a look at your expenses and those kind of things. So we need to make sure that our pricing is okay so that we do cover our expenses and make enough to pay ourselves. And I do understand that need to be competitive, but again, and this is what we'll talk at with some ideas, there are other ways to stand out and have a great service without offering more and more stuff for less and less money. So we're looking at some ideas today of how you can give a bit more to your students, how you can kind of give yourself a kind of like an uplift in the services that you offer, maybe make yourself stand out a little bit, be a bit different from other people, and you know, and to do all of this without exhausting yourself. So the first thing to think about is our actual skill set and our boundaries around that. So at the beginning, I was talking about, you know, how we can see people's needs and we really want to help people. And there can be a risk at this point of slightly overstepping our boundaries. So we need to be really clear about what our training is in, what we're specialist in, and what we're not specialist in. And so one very simple thing where you can add a little bit of value is to build up some resources and names and details of other professionals that you can refer onto, or other services you can refer onto. And this may not feel like a big deal, and it may feel like, why would I send people away? But actually, in my experience, having a trusted recommendation from somebody is worth so much to the person receiving it. And so if we see that our students are struggling with something, and actually what they need is a professional trained in a slightly different modality or a completely different service altogether, if we have some resources that we know about, that's an amazing add to the service that you offer, and that you can set yourself as someone with a very broad range of experience and knowledge, and a go-to person for the field overall. So clients that I've worked with, for example, on a one-to-one basis with my Yoga for Cancer, after an additional surgery, there was a real issue around continence. And so I referred a private physio who within a few sessions had made a massive difference. It was just about sort of reconnecting the messages through to the muscles and just a little bit of retraining after some abdominal surgery. Made a huge, huge difference to my client. they were so grateful to me to have that recommendation. And it doesn't mean that they're then not going to carry on with me and only work with the physio. So it didn't cost me anything to say, I know an amazing physio, here's their website, here's the phone number. And it was a way to to offer more as my service. So not just being a yoga teacher, but also somebody who knows other things as well. And it doesn't overstep my training because it wasn't me trying to fix that particular issue. Although there are some pelvic floor things we can do in yoga, but this needed something more specialist. So that was really helpful to them. And again, with somebody else, with hair loss through chemotherapy, and in the summer, like we're having now, some hot weather, and their skin was sensitive and they weren't getting on with their wig. And I was just able to give them a few leaflets and companies of alternative head coverings that they might want to go and have a look at. And again, that they were so grateful for that. And it didn't feel like I was doing very much, but it really changed her quality of life for that period of time. So that's a very simple place that you can start with as a way to give people more. And I would really recommend developing some professional relationships with other people in your area who perhaps work in the same sort of field, serve the same sort of clients as your students, but do something different. And you can have this mutual referral going back and forth. I have a very lovely acupuncturist, like just a couple of miles away from me, and we send each other people. I'm not an acupuncturist. And she's not a yoga teacher or a reflexologist. So, this works really well, that when other people know what you do, they can send people your way and vice versa. It's a really easy way just to give a bit more to your students. Second idea, and again, something I really recommend, and we also look at doing this in the course as well, is how to build some resources that will take a bit of time and energy initially, hopefully won't necessarily cost you any money, but you build a library of resources that you then can use over and over and over again, so that you're not creating something new every single time you want to give something to somebody. So one thing that can be really useful for most students and quite easy for you to do is to record a guided relaxation, for example. And you can do that as an audio file. You can share that with your students. And this is something then that they get in addition to their class. And in a similar way, you can record videos. It's very easy to record yourself now, either directly onto your phone, or you can record yourself on Zoom. And you can build up a library of, say, short home practices, whether it's like 5-10 minutes kind of practice bites, as it were, or maybe a 20 to 30 minute home practice. Choose what you think your students would appreciate. And again, once you've made these videos, you can use them in lots of different ways. But if you have a little library of videos or guided relaxation or nidra or recordings, all of these things you can keep as a private part of your YouTube channel, or you could have on your website, and that these perhaps are only accessible by students in your class. So you could password protect it, for example. So this is like an extra thing that you could give people at not necessarily any extra cost. So you can choose how you would want to do that. And it could be something that if people sign up to a whole term of classes with you, they get access to these videos whilst they're kind of doing their term, so they have a bit of home practice in between. But also you could offer that then as as a paid service. So it might be people who are not coming to your in-person classes, but they might be looking for some good videos, and that could be a paid service to access. So there's different ways of using it, and then you've got a product that you can potentially sell as well, and you can use these resources to help build packages for people as well. Other things that can be useful as some resources can be really nice information sheets. So I have a few simple ones around breathing practices, meditation, that kind of thing. Not everybody necessarily wants a video. They might want to have something that's away from a screen. So you can make some very pretty PDF type things in Canva. So you can make these nice looking information sheets, and they don't even have to be that nice looking. But again, these are things that you can create, and once you've made them, then they're there. They're just very easy to add as an email attachment, that you can send to people, that you can print out and give as handouts in class. So you can build up some of these resources. You could do, say, information sheets on a theme. So I know some teachers like to work with themes either per month or per term. So you could create a little information sheet about some of the key things in your theme. Maybe it's about a particular chakra. Maybe you're focusing on balances. So you could create a really nice information sheet, PDF type thing that you can share with people. And it's a way to reinforce their learning. It's so easy to go to a class and everything makes sense. You go, oh yeah, I love what they said. Oh, I must remember that. And then people don't, because life is busy and we need to hear things 100 times before it sticks. So sometimes like reinforcing that with some handouts can be really helpful. I know some teachers use Tummy, which is it's a program that you have little images of yoga practices, so you can do a visual home practice. Again, that can be a really nice thing to do, in addition or instead of videos. So there's all of these things that you can do, and I really recommend that you save them. So what I used to do was spend ages like writing a personal follow-up email to somebody with all the talking points, the books I recommended, some practices, some instruction about breathing, and then it's kind of gone. And I sort of look back and cringe at how long it took me to realize that I'm often recommending very similar things to people because I attract a certain kind of client who often have very similar needs. So if we create these resources, so what I do now with a follow-up email is to have, and this is for one-to-ones, is to say, lovely to see you. Here's some of our talking points. Attached is the breathing practice, a link to my video, and a list of my recommended reading. And so when you save these in places, it becomes very quick. And to the person receiving it, it feels like a really special service that they've kind of got given all this extra stuff on top of the class. So these are things that you can do and make your life easy. So you might want to spend some time creating the resources first, getting them really nice. But what I would say with that as well is don't endlessly tweak and procrastinate. Just get something done, use it, send it. If you want to tweak it, update it, improve it, you can do that over time, but don't let it stop you from making the resource in the first place, because otherwise you can just reach this block of it's not perfect enough, it's not ready yet, and then we end up not doing the things, and then we're not solving the problem. So yeah, make it really simple and easy. So what else can we do? So we've got about some mutual referrals. So just building up some, finding out what's in your area, get a list of resources, creating your own resources. And then there can be something around from that. You can create some high price packages. And this could be a bit like a kind of VIP service, so that you've got all these additional things that you can create something that is good value for money, but you're not having to create it from scratch every single time you have a new student. So it could be that you have a specialist one-to-one package around an area that you work in. And not only is it that they buy, say, 10 classes with you, in addition, they get access to your video library, they will get some practice plans, they will get these information sheets, these handouts, like there's a whole bundle of stuff that you've already made. So it doesn't cost you any time or money to give it to them once it's created, but they have a value, so we don't necessarily want this to be always just given away for free, but you can keep it as these additional things you can add on for people who are committed to working with you. And that's a way that you give a bit more to those people who are loyal to you. And again, you might want to have a small amount that's available to anyone and everyone, because it can be a really nice way for people to come and do almost like a taster with you. If they could access one half-an-hour video to see what your teaching style's like, what your voice is like do they click with you? Is this somebody they want to work with? That can be a really good way to get people to come to your classes, because it's a try before you buy type of thing. But again, what's nice about that is that you're not then giving away a place in your actual class. So I know with some teachers, they say, oh, first class is free. And that can work. But if you don't have a space where you have for a lot of students, you're potentially giving away a paid spot for free, just for someone to see whether or not they want to work with you. So what might be a better option is to give them a video for free. They can watch in their own time whenever. So you're not giving additional time to somebody who's not made a commitment to you. You're not giving away a paid place in your class. And it might get you that extra student, because they might do the freebie and then realize like, oh yeah, this is what I'm looking for. They can see on your website the days and the times of your classes, and that can work really well. So looking at those kind of things. And then the last thing, and it's a little bit about making yourself a little bit different, and making it something very different from, say, an online only pre-recorded service, or say going to a gym. And that is the community that we can create with our classes. And there's a real opportunity to perhaps deepen that over time. So there are always going to be people who need or want to just show up in a gym class, do their thing, and walk out again, and not necessarily have a relationship with the teacher or anyone else in the room. And that's absolutely fine. We are all free to practice the yoga in the way that suits us best. But I know there are a lot of people who really, especially after the pandemic, there are a lot of people, I noticed questions both to me, but also, you know, noticing things in, say, local community Facebook groups, people asking for in-person yoga. They wanted to go back to a studio. They wanted to be in an actual room with real live people. And I think the reason they want that is that human connection. So if it was only the yoga practice that they wanted, then, you know, you can access that online. There's a gazillion YouTube videos. But I think they want the personal connection and also more bespoke teaching and personal attention. So this is something that we can really, you know, create a bit more in our classes. So it might be that to really make this a little bit more bespoke, you can start to enroll your students in the class creation. You could send out a survey, say once a quarter or even just every 6 months, saying, you know, are there particular areas you'd like to focus on? You could just survey the class at the end of the class and just ask people, you know, coming up over the next few months, like, what are your issues? What do you want to focus on? So not only does that help give you inspiration for your classes, it's creating this two-way relationship. And that's a really different thing from rocking up to a studio class in a gym or pre-recorded things. And there can be the sense of community where there's a group discussion and a consensus around, you know, where you want the class to go. Obviously, it's your class and you need to teach what's authentic to you. So there's a balance there. But it's really nice to hear from people, you know, what are the things they love most about the class? What would they like more of? You know, getting that kind of feedback is really lovely. You could, again, on a regular basis, however often works for you, have a class that's more like a workshop. So maybe that's once a term, once a quarter, once a month, you know, however it works for your group, that you could say to people, I'm not going to be preparing a set class. This is going to be a bit more of a workshop. Like, are there postures that you always find difficult? Maybe we can workshop that a little bit. You know, do you have a problem, say, with balancing? Maybe we can really work on that. And it's a bit more of a chatty class, you know, problem solving for people, you know, that could be a Q&A, that is a bit more interactive as a workshop. And again, you don't have to write the workshop in advance because you want people to bring their questions to you. You don't have to create more time for it because it's just when your regular class is. But this is something that for your students can be like a really special thing. It's not costing them any more to have this kind of workshop event, and really tackles some personal things for them, which they just can't get from, you know, being in a class with 100 people or watching a recording where there's no two-way interaction. So that could be a really nice thing. And the other thing that I see some people do quite successfully, and you'll have to see if this works in your life, is to have every now and then to have a social with the class. So it could be just having some tea and snacks at the end of class, at the end of term. It might be marking a special occasion, like we've just had the summer solstice. So there could be some key points where you might want to do a social activity, and whether that's going out for a meal, whether it's doing a walk in nature, if you have something lovely nearby, that again can be a nice way to really deepen those relationships, to have it makes your class a bit more special. So there's lots of things that you could do. Obviously, it depends whether, you know, you want to do something that is going to be a little bit more time, but hopefully it's a fun social thing for you too. Now, obviously that doesn't work for everybody. But I just wanted to put out some of these ideas of how you can make your classes, better and different, without exhausting yourself too much. So we're looking at, mutual referrals to other professionals, so that we're building those resources and recommendations for your students, building your own resources, so recordings, information sheets, handouts, videos, whatever you find quick and easy to do, create some of those. You can then bundle those into packages for one-to-one clients so that you can charge a really good price. You're giving good value. And it means then that you're able to, give them that kind of specialist service. And then we're looking at building the community aspect of your class as well, to make that something that people really feel like they belong and they want to stay belonging to. And so they become really loyal students who will stay for a long time. So I hope that's given you some inspiration and some ideas of how we can deliver more but not end up completely exhausted trying to be all the things to all the people all the time. So if there were any little insights or aha moments, I would love to hear them in the comments below. And if you would like some public accountability, because sometimes that's really useful. If there's something that you've been meaning to do but haven't, or you've had an idea from listening to this and you want to put in the comments what you're going to create and your deadline, then absolutely feel free to use this space for a little bit of peer support and accountability, and we can come and check in and see how you're doing with that. So I'm going to wish you a very lovely rest of this sunny day, and I'll be here same time next week. Take care.